Well, I have nothing to say. I have to go into recovery. This is not just a brilliant film, it's a life experience. And I see it as a collaboration between you and Jane. I mean, it's what you see in so many films, and good ones, is the director, the auteur's manipulation, moving you from here to there to there to there, so that you were being instructed in how to feel and how to think and how to do this and how to do that. This has none of that. This is like life itself, where we're following Jane's experiences and travails and trying to figure things out and falling on her face. We go step by step by step, and it's as much our autobiography as it is hers, whether you're male or female. I think it's a remarkable and brilliant piece of work, and I loved it the first time I saw it. I love it even more and feel more this time around, so thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And what do you have to say for yourself?
What do I have to say for myself? You know, I read Jane's book about 17 years ago, and I was so struck by, is it not working?
See, the man's mic
I just
works.
have a soft voice, but carry a big stick, like Jane. I was very struck by Jane's ability to be so honest about herself and to look at her life through a lens of, I want to know as much as I can about myself, so, as she says, so I can figure out how to proceed in the future. And that includes acknowledging your missteps and her candor about that, and the universality, I thought, of her story. There was so much in her story that I related to personally, and I bet you a whole lot of people are going to relate to this too. And so I became interested in telling this story a long, long time ago. And I was at PBS at the time and doing the American Masters series, which I created and ran for many, many, many years. And I had to raise all the money for that series, and it was hard to raise money for films like this that had so much archive and feature films and all that. So when I made the move to HBO, I thought, Jane is doing a series at HBO called Newsroom. Maybe this is the time for this film. So they enthusiastically embraced it, and I embraced it, and then I went to Jane, and she embraced it. And she didn't have anything to do with the making of this film. I mean, the first thing she'll tell you when all this was premiering at Sundance and every place else, she said, I had no idea what Susan was going to do. I mean, she couldn't believe we found the audio to the Nixon tapes. She'd never heard them before. But what we did do together is that I knew what I hoped would happen is that there was a tremendous amount of trust. It's one thing to write your story 17 years ago in the quiet of your writer's room, and it's quite another to do it in front of a camera 15 years later and relive it with so much honesty and emotion. And I think a lot of that was because we formed a relationship of trust. She felt safe, and I related to her story. So it came from my heart, this film. And I think that's a really important part of filmmaking is you have to know where you're coming from. But her story is her story, and she tells it better than anybody else, which is why I did not do a tremendous number of other interviews for it, as opposed to my previous film on Steven Spielberg, where I did 87 other interviews besides the 15 hours with Steven, or the 30 hours with Steven, excuse me. I don't know if I answered that question, but it came, I don't know that I answered it, but this film is very personal to me. And I knew it was going to be personal to a lot of other people, not just women, even though I do think of it as a gender journey. This film is a gender journey.
I think it must be personal to everyone.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay.
What? Did somebody say something?
No, just,
I said, I think it must be personal to everyone, perhaps with the single exception of Dick Cavett, who doesn't seem to understand anything. But it's when the last chapter head goes on and says Jane, I gasped. I mean, it was an inward gasp, but because I went with you from the beginning on this journey, and it is a journey, and it doesn't seem to me to matter whether you're male or female or on the left or right, although being on the left certainly helps. But it's because it mirrors the struggle that all of us have since from the time we're little, and from the time she's little certainly, to define ourselves. And some of us manage over a long life to do this, and so many of us don't ever quite get there. But it's you recognize, whether you get there or you don't get there, the struggle, the bravery, the fuck-ups, the mistakes, the misunderstandings, and her openness to admit having done stupid things, you know, and said dumb things, and she says all of it without any sense of affect. There's none of that. If I've offended any of you, you know, there's none of that. She knows she's been offended, and she knows that there were times to have done that properly, and that she also did it improperly. And she is quite remarkably open about all of this. And it's the openness that just kills you all the way through. The openness, the need to become herself, which has taken a lifetime.
well, I mean, she was very clear that if you don't keep learning, there's no reason to still be around. And Jane did just turn 80, so there is a perspective here. I love the fact that she can acknowledge that she spent many decades, as she said, being superficial. And she said it was easier, more convenient. But her recognition that that wasn't a way to live a life, and that she was always on a learning. She was always learning and getting to know more about herself. But it wasn't really until she left that marriage with Ted that she decided to really explore her past and understand it. And yes, yeah. But it is a gender journey, and she'd be the first to acknowledge that. When she first saw the film, I was with her, and we watched it together alone. And we were kind of holding hands.
Oh,
I mean, seriously, yeah, we were holding hands. At one point, she reached over and grabbed my hand, and because it wasn't easy to watch. And she said this was not an easy film to watch. You have to watch yourself grow over time, make mistakes, sound stupid at times, and just relive that whole thing in front of you. As I said, it's quite different to write it. It's quite a different thing to watch it. And we were both kind of crying. There were times during the interviews that we would both be crying, talking about her mother. The mother story is a very, obviously, huge part of this film, and her daughter. And so at the end of watching it together, she said, I have to watch this with Vanessa.
yes.
But I have to watch it with Vanessa alone, and I want her to see this before it comes out. I want to make sure she's okay with this. So she flew Vanessa to Los Angeles, and they watched it. And she emailed me right away and said, call me. And I called her, and she said, phew. Phew. She liked it. She loved it. She wasn't offended that she wasn't in it. Now, Vanessa chose not to be in the film. But I think Jane was worried because she's trying so hard to build that relationship that she might feel offended that she
Yes.
is in fact a kind of a theme. There's a theme running through the film, and it ends with, I mean, to some degree, with I hope one day Vanessa will be able to forgive me, that she would be talked about in a film that she didn't participate in, but she was fine with it. So that was a big relief to Jane.
Well, she didn't participate, but she's certainly in it, and you know, and she's in it because she's on Jane's mind continually throughout it.
And, you know, she repeated some of the mistakes of her own parents, I mean, her father in particular, and then recognized it and fixed it with her next child. And, I mean, I don't know what to say. I love making the film. I love getting to know Jane. We're still buddies.
But the art of this film is it doesn't look like it was made. It looks like it just happened. And clearly that's because you made it feel like it just happened. And you follow it whether you want to or not. You are compelled. It's like reading a novel that grabs you and you can't put it down.
Oh, that's very
Well,
nice
you
to
can't
say.
put this film down. It just takes you and shakes you and moves you here and moves you there. And to see, what shocked me most at the end was the aging of Ted Turner.
Yeah.
Where Jane never becomes old. He
Yes,
he
I
was
know.
old.
It's when we pulled up, and I was in the car with her coming from the airport in Bozeman, and we had been told that Ted was going to greet her when
Yeah.
she arrived. And as before we pulled down the road to go in front of the ranch, I got out of the car because a cameraman was getting out, and I had to get out so we could see Jane. You know, I wouldn't be in the footage. And I kept saying, "Where's Ted?"
Yeah.
And there's this man, he looked like Santa Claus and like the foreman. And we didn't know who he was. And I thought, God, where's Ted? And then Jane went over to him and we all went, she was shocked too. It happens. He's had some health issues and it happens. But he was very gracious. And I was very worried about the interview with him. I was sure we weren't going to get it. I kept waiting that morning. They wanted to do it early because he was going to the doctor, in fact, and they had to helicopter him someplace. And wanted to do it at 7 in the morning. So I woke up at 5 and I kept looking at my phone. I kept looking. I said, they're going to cancel this. They're going to cancel it. I know they're going to cancel it. And they didn't. And he kind of came alive for 30 minutes there in that interview. And it was really touching to me how much he's, you know, it came so clear how much he still loved her. You know, and I mean, I had a kind of a tear. I mean, I tear up easily, but didn't you all feel that?
Well, I just stayed up too.
I mean, oh, it was just so moving. There's so many moving parts, and I love when her best friend Paula Weinstein says, "Nobody moves me as much as Jane," and I really understood when she said that, which is why I wanted to keep it in the film. Jane's very moving, and it's not just that she's gone through a lot, and she's the first to admit, I'm a privileged, rich white woman. I mean, come on, I'm sorry, can you feel for me? But the journey that she took is so moving, and that she's still so insecure. There is a vulnerability in Jane that has not gone away. And, you know, as a filmmaker, you do things that you're not sure anybody will ever notice, but you kind of hope they do, and subliminally they do. I very purposely ended the opening montage with Jane as a little girl putting up a flower. And I ended it very purposely with Jane as a little girl walking through her shadows. Because for me, what I felt all through the making of this film is that little girl Blue was never going to go away. Didn't mean she hadn't surmounted it in some way. And she has to some degree, but it's always a little bit there. And I felt that. I mean, I would say something to her about her hair, and she'd say, "Does it look okay?" You know, I mean, there's, you know, seriously, there is a vulnerability that I think will never go away, and I think a lot, particularly women, I think, can relate to that.
Well, for women or men, you know, as Redford says at the end, she has a degree of courage that he said he didn't have, you know, and I don't know that anybody has. I mean, what she involved herself in, put herself through, came out the other side, saw the need to change, and figured out how, the change that was, and became a better human being. Although the human being she became, the path was never clear where it was going to end, and it could have just as easily ended in disgrace and being broke and being a pariah. And her courage and her insistence on redeeming herself
And her
and moving
commitment,
on.
and her commitment to activism.
Yeah.
There's that piece of footage, I don't know if you remember it in the film, where she has her arms on a young girl and she's pushing her. That's her granddaughter. She's pushing her granddaughter into the next generation of activism. And I love it when Troy, didn't you love Troy? We all wanted to marry him in the edit room. Says, sometimes I want to say to my mom, you don't have to work so hard anymore. You have nothing to prove anymore. But that activism keeps her demons at bay. And it's not payback. It's genuine. I mean, Jane...
You don't feel it's work or proving anything. It's this is what she has to do.
Exactly. And she will do it until she can't do it anymore. And so she's a beacon. I mean, I can't tell you the letters that I have gotten from around the world, from thousands of letters from people, women and men, about how this story has touched them. And it's just, I knew it was going to, but I didn't know it was going to be that amazingly relevant to people. And it's been very gratifying.
What about, has the film been attacked?
Has it been what?
Has the film been attacked?
There were a few reviews that said they thought that I scrimped on her movie career. And
Oh, really?
yeah, I didn't think I did, actually, but
You mean it wasn't about show business?
it wasn't about show business. And I very purposely decided not to make a film about a movie star. And that's the first thing that Jane actually said to me. I forgot that when she called me. She said, I want to thank, when we were there, she said, I want to thank you for not making a film about a
Well,
movie star.
outside of the fact that you didn't make it all about the movie business, I liked it very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
And we are now being told that we have to stop, although I could go,
Because they have another engagement here.
they do?
Yeah, they do. Thank you.
Screw them. Thank you all.